Picture this: a valley in northern France, soaked in October rain. The earth smells of wet wheat and rot. Every step pulls at your boots. Across that grey field, two armies stare through mist and mud. On one side, a handful of exhausted Englishmen, their cloaks torn, bellies empty, faces drawn by hunger. Farmers, fletchers, carpenters, commoners, 5,000 of them, gripping longbows as tall as themselves. On the other, a wall of shining steel. French nobles on horses draped in velvet, helmets plumed with gold thread, armor so polished it throws back the little light left in the sky. They have numbers, wealth, and the confidence of centuries. The gap between them isn't just rank, it's belief. The one side, war is ritual, a test of honor, of birth, of divine order. For the other, it's craft, built on patience, training, and teamwork. Steel versus wood, status versus discipline. You can almost feel the weight of that silence before the storm. Mud shifting beneath hooves, the hiss of rain against plate, the creak of 1,000 bowstrings tightening in the mist. They say history turns on great kings and greater swords. But sometimes it turns on mud, geometry, and men who know how to hold their ground. Before the first arrow flies, ask yourself this: why would King Henry V trust hungry peasants with bows against the mightiest knights in Europe? And why did those knights, the very image of chivalry, charge straight into a trap they couldn't even see? This isn't just a battle. It's the moment an idea died, when 5,000 archers made centuries of noble warfare obsolete. To understand how this day came to break an age, you need to see what both sides believed, because before swords clashed, faiths did. On the French side, pride sits tall on horseback. Their code is centuries old. Rank proves worth, armor proves divine favor, and a man born to rule must be seen, not hidden on the field. To them, the very idea that common bowmen could decide a battle felt absurd. Peasants fight for bread, knights fight for glory, and glory, to them, is everything. That belief shapes their plan. The noblest names, dukes, counts, barons, all demand the front line. Crossbowmen and foot soldiers are pushed aside. The formation bloats, the field narrows, but no one yields position. Because in their eyes, order follows birth, not sense. Across the field, King Henry V walks through the mud among his archers. He's 28 years old, young, scarred, and utterly sure. He knows his men haven't eaten well in days. He knows they're outnumbered at least 4 to 1. But he also knows the value of discipline and terrain. He dismounts his men-at-arms and orders them to fight on foot, shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield. He tells the archers to plant sharpened stakes in the mud, angled outward like the teeth of a monster. Each bowman drives his own, hammering until the stake bites deep. When they finish, they stand behind a wooden hedge that can kill a horse before it reaches them. The English line looks simple, but it's not. It's a machine. Each roll fits into the next. Archers fix the flanks. Men-at-arms hold the center. No one moves without purpose. Now picture a single knight. He lowers his visor. The sound dulls to a heartbeat and the rasp of his own breath. Through the slit, the world shrinks. Grey sky, brown mud, and a wall of wooden stakes. Armor keeps him alive, but it also traps him, locks out air, sight, and speed. Each step drags. Each breath fogs the visor. He's powerful, but blind. That's the flaw Henry bets everything on. The French believe speed wins. Henry knows speed means nothing when you can't move. This is the battle before the battle. Faith against physics. One army worships heritage, the other obeys math. And as we'll see next, the field itself will choose a side. At dawn, mist still covers the ground. The field looks open, harmless even, but to the eye of a tactician, it's a vice waiting to close. The Battle of Agincourt is fought in a long, narrow strip of farmland, hemmed by two forests. Tramcourt to the west, Agincourt Wood to the east. It's been raining for days. The ploughed soil has turned into thick, sticky mud that grabs hooves and feet like glue. Henry looks at that mud and smiles, because it's not just weather, it's weaponry. Here's the rule: big armies need space to use their power, but this field offers none. The French, 10 times Henry's size, must funnel through a corridor barely wide enough for a few hundred men across. The larger they are, the less they can move. As the first ranks of French cavalry surge forward, the hooves sink deep. Mud splashes up like wet clay. A horse stumbles, jerks its reins, and behind it a dozen others pile in. The weight of armor that once meant invincibility now drags its wearers into the earth. From above, the scene looks like a river of steel slowing to sludge, each man pushing the one before him, each step sinking deeper, each breath harder to take. Henry's archers stand firm behind their stakes, flanking both sides of this narrow funnel. The French, trapped between woods, can't spread out or turn. They can only go forward, into the rain of arrows waiting above them. Mud doesn't just slow men. It steals their balance, their vision, their pride. The first to fall become obstacles. The next ranks trip over them. And every second, the line thickens. This is where scale betrays itself. Tens of thousands come forward, and the field crushes them into a single choking mass. Henry's archers knock, draw, and wait. 5,000 strings pulled to the ear, the sound like a breath before thunder. Then comes the hiss. The air fills with a dark storm of arrows, falling in waves so fast they seem to hum. Mud, stakes, geometry. The French never had a chance. The killing hasn't even begun, but the battle is already lost. The air changes fast. You can feel it. The tension of men who've trained for years waiting for a single command. 5,000 archers, peasants mostly, stand shoulder to shoulder, mud up to their shins. The smell of damp straw, wet leather, and sweat fills the air. They've planted their sharpened stakes at an angle, a forest of thorns waiting for horses. They've pre-stuck arrows in the ground around their feet, points upward like crops ready to reap. Each bow is yew, taller than its archer, polished smooth by years of use. Each string hums with tension, waxed and dry despite the rain. To an outsider, it looks primitive. To those men, it's precision. A rhythm honed from childhood. Most were trained by law. England required peasants to practice archery on Sundays. They grew up pulling bows until their shoulders hardened, until bone and sinew remembered the motion better than thought itself. Now, across the field, they face an ocean of steel. The French line gleams through the mist, a living mirror of polished armor. Plumes shake on helmets. Horses stamp and foam, restless in the mud. Trumpets sound, slow, grand, certain. To the nobles, this isn't battle, it's ceremony. They've done this 100 times before and won. But chivalry doesn't understand mud. It doesn't understand how fast a bow can change a sky. At the signal, 5,000 men raise their bows as one. The lines stretch, wood creaks, and in the space between heartbeats, the first volley flies. The sound isn't one noise but many. The thrum of bowstrings, the hiss of feathers, the soft, deadly rain that follows. Arrows rise like black dust, vanish into the clouds, then fall with the sound of tearing cloth and striking iron. The first French ranks lift shields. Horses flinch, rear, scream. The second ranks push forward, blind to the mess ahead. Each arrow might not kill, but it breaks rhythm, blinds an eye, tears at hands, glances off a visor with a sound that haunts the nerves. Then the next wave comes. Heavier shafts, bodkin-tipped, meant for piercing joints and faces. They find the gaps at the knee, the elbow, under the arm, at the thin slit of a visor. Steel was built to turn blades, not rain. The longbows fire again and again and again. 6 arrows a minute, 5,000 bows at once. That's 30,000 shafts every 60 seconds. Every breath a new storm. The air itself hums with motion. The horses, brave as they are, can't bear it. They plunge into the mud, slipping, dragging riders down with them. Behind them, more come, unable to stop. The narrow lane becomes a river of falling weight. Flesh, steel, and hooves all tangled. You can see it now. Knights clawing to rise. Armor coated in mud, shields dented, horses crushed beneath their own riders. The storm doesn't stop. It just keeps falling. French crossbowmen, their answer to the archers, try to move up, but they're boxed in by their own nobles. They can't see, can't aim, can't shoot. The front is clogged with men too proud to step aside. And that's the paradox of power. The strongest men on the field are now trapped by their own numbers. The bows, cheap and light, are rewriting the shape of battle. One side believes in valor, the other in gravity. The French advance collapses not in fire or thunder, but in mud and noise, and the slow grind of men who cannot move. What comes next isn't a fight, it's a crush. You hear it before you see it. The muffled roar of thousands pressing into a space too small to hold them. The sound of armor scraping armor, men gasping under weight, horses screaming as they slip. The French charge has failed to form clean lines. Now it's a jam, one that moves not by command but by pressure. The front ranks are pinned against stakes and bodies. The middle ranks keep pushing, blind to what's ahead, and the rear ranks can't see anything but banners and backs. Every man tries to go forward, none can. The field becomes a machine of flesh and steel, grinding itself apart. A knight slips, falls to one knee, tries to rise, but the weight of those behind him crushes him flat. Breath leaves through gaps in the visor. Mud fills the mouthpiece. The man behind him doesn't even know he's stepped on a friend. The English archers see it. They drop their bows, draw knives, hammers and mallets, the same tools they used to drive stakes. They wade forward into the chaos. It's not elegance, it's survival. The crush means armor no longer matters. A man pinned can't swing his sword. He can't even lift his arm. A mallet to the head, a knife to the visor slit. The kind of close, brutal work that strips the glamour off war. Mud becomes grave and weapon both. Every fall creates another trap. The ground eats men whole. In the center, Henry's men-at-arms step forward in short bursts, 2-3 feet at a time. They don't chase, they hold shape. Every inch they gain is solid. Every push is deliberate. What started as the pride of Europe now lies piled at their feet, the nobility of France, choking in the mud of a farmer's field. And still the arrows fall. Not to kill now, but to herd, to confuse, to remind every man in steel that even his armor has limits. You can feel the moment power changes sides. It's not a trumpet, it's not a cheer. It's a silence that spreads as men realize the charge will never reach the wall. They thought they were fighting peasants. They were fighting math, mud, and men who refused to move. And what the field does next, it doesn't just kill soldiers. It kills an idea.
It takes a certain kind of courage to step down from your horse when every law of your age says that's where power sits. But that's exactly what Henry did. The moment he swung a boot off the stirrup, the air itself seemed to change. Steel creaked, mud sucked at the heels of men who followed his lead. And suddenly, the highest-born commander in the field was standing in the same filth as the poorest archer beside him. For generations, kings were made by how they looked on a horse, the height, the gleam, the vantage point of control. The saddle was a throne that could move. From there, a monarch could see his banners, signal the charge, and feel untouchable above the crush. That was the image of order in a world ruled by sight and spectacle. But Henry V of England wasn't chasing spectacle. He was chasing survival. He had already seen what the ground could do to men in armor, how the mud chewed their feet, how horses panicked under arrow rain, how chaos turned gold into dead weight. So he broke the pattern. He stripped the height that marked his class and joined the ranks on foot, sword, shield, and resolve. To the nobles beside him, it must have felt wrong. To the men watching him, it meant everything. Because the moment a king gives up distance, fear gives up ground. Imagine it, a grey sky drooping with mist, banners hanging limp in wet air. The king, not gleaming on horseback, but standing shoulder to shoulder, visor lifted, speaking so his men could see his eyes. He walks the line, mud streaking his boots, chain rattling with each breath, and says no word of glory, only the simple rhythm of orders. Hold the line, trust your stakes, wait for the signal. That image did more than any drum. When a leader stands with you, not over you, fear shrinks. Every archer who had been just another hungry man with a bow now saw himself as part of something that could last. Not a miracle, a method. And that belief, quiet, earned, human, can hold against anything. Contrast that with the chaos across the lane. The French nobles still clung to their horses, still believed height meant safety. They shouted over one another, each trying to claim the honor of the charge, their pride turning formation into crowd. The mud turned proud destriers into trembling shadows. The arrows above sang a single, terrible note, downward. Henry's decision had rewritten the geometry of power. When he dismounted, he didn't just give up the saddle. He changed the battlefield's shape. On foot, the English line fused into one living wall. Every gap closed fast because command no longer came from afar. It came from a voice in the mud, a gesture beside you, a shove of a shield where the line bent. Hold! A shout, close and clear. Loose! 2 volleys ripple from the archers on the flanks. Then silence. The pause before the next storm of arrows falls like rain through mist. Mounted kings issue orders like prayers to distance. But a king on foot speaks to faces. The men can read his eyes. They can see if he doubts. Henry didn't. Think of what that moment means. a monarch lowering himself into the same muck as his soldiers, not to share suffering for show, but because the ground itself demanded it. That choice collapsed the old pyramid of war. For one afternoon, class disappeared beneath a coat of wet earth. The French saw banners, Henry saw angles. They saw lineage, he saw lanes of mud. They counted noble bloodlines, he counted firing arcs. And on that arithmetic, one side built a myth, the other a system. When the next charge came, Henry's wall did not budge. The arrows thudded in rhythm, and when they stopped, the men-at-arms took one short, measured step forward. No roar, no gallop, just the sound of mud and breath and steel grinding forward, inch by inch. That's how kingdoms survive, not in grand gestures, but in slow, deliberate inches. When you picture Henry V, don't imagine the shining king of the plays. Picture a man standing knee-deep in mud, with rain running down the visor of his helm, knowing that every step backward ends England. He chose ground over glory, and in doing so, he made both immortal.
When the arrows finally stopped, there was no cheer, only breath, ragged, heavy, human. The field that morning had been a stage for pride. By afternoon, it had become a graveyard for it. You can imagine the sight. Mud churned into blood, the soft earth turned black and red. The fallen knights of France, men of title, men of gold and stories, lay packed so thick that horses could no longer pass between them. Helmets glinted faintly in the grey light, half buried, like coins in wet soil. And in that stillness, history itself seemed to pause, stunned. No army meant to move like that. 5,000 Englishmen, tired, hungry, many barefoot, had met a force several times their size and watched it crumble. But it wasn't luck, it wasn't magic. It was geometry, mud, and discipline. Three things no legend ever sings about, but which quietly decide the fate of worlds. And the cost was staggering. The flower of French nobility, hundreds of knights, lords, and heirs, gone in one day. Names that had ruled for generations now ended in silence, their banners trampled into the same mud as every other man's. That's why Agincourt didn't just wound an army. It wounded an idea. The idea that birth alone makes a soldier, that courage on horseback outruns strategy on foot, that a noble's plate could outshine a peasant's bow. All of it snapped in a single afternoon. You can almost feel the disbelief in the French camp that night. The survivors, stunned, mud-caked, faces streaked with rain and tears, sat in silence. The air smelled of smoke and wet iron. They had charged for glory, but glory had drowned in the mud before their eyes. Back in England, word spread faster than any rider could carry it. It crossed the channel on whispers and ballads, carried by merchants, monks, and rumour itself. A small army, led by a young king, had faced the might of France and won. But the story that lingered wasn't about Henry's crown. It was about the bow, about how the common man, with the right ground and discipline, could shatter a social order centuries old. That's why historians call Agincourt a hinge in time. It wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the end of a world view. A world where power rode on horseback and looked down on those who walked. From that day on, armies began to change shape.
Kings began to count not names but numbers, not horses but men who could stand in a line and work together. You see it in the ledgers that follow. Less gold spent on armor, more on bows, arrows, and pay. You see it in the contracts. Less talk of ransom and honor, more of range and supply. You see it in the years ahead, when gunpowder and drilled fire would finish what wood and feather began. But that afternoon, it was still the longbow's world. The Englishman stood amid a silence so deep it felt holy, the kind of quiet that comes only when history exhales. Behind them, rows of spent arrows stuck in the ground like a forest of iron thorns. Before them, the cost of victory, a carpet of armor and ruin. The smell of rain and smoke still hung low, and somewhere, someone began to pray. For France, it was a nightmare written in mud. For England, it was proof that faith in form and training could outlast faith in rank. And for the world, it was a message. Technology and teamwork had changed the meaning of courage. Because courage wasn't the man who charged alone anymore. It was the one who held steady while the storm came in, who drew, loosed, and drew again in the rhythm of his comrades. That's what won the day. The quiet discipline of many over the pride of a few. By dusk, Agincourt was more than a victory. It was a revelation, the moment when a weapon made of yew and string shook the very order of Europe. The knights had ruled the field for centuries. That day, 5,000 bowmen made them history. And in that fading light, one truth lingered, simple and cold. You don't just kill men on a battlefield. Sometimes, you kill an era. When the echoes fade, what's left isn't triumph. It's silence. A silence that smells of rain, iron, and smoke. A silence that means the world has changed. The archers are still standing, tired, soaked, eyes hollow. Their hands shake, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Each of them knows they've done something impossible. Not just surviving, but rewriting what war itself means. This was supposed to be a clash of classes, peasants against princes, commoners against crowns. But in the mud, those walls blurred. Discipline beat privilege. 1,000 cheap bows broke 1,000 years of tradition. The field at Agincourt didn't just kill knights. It killed the illusion that courage and coin were the same thing. It showed that precision, the quiet kind, the practiced kind, could change the fate of kingdoms. Henry rode away from that field as a legend, but the men who made that legend walked. And history, slowly, reluctantly, started to remember their names not as numbers, but as proof. Proof that order, patience, and rhythm can undo pride, armor, and chaos. Think about that for a second. 5,000 men with wood and string. No titles, no horses, just trust in training. And a king who believed the quiet rhythm of a bow was stronger than the noise of a charge. We like to think the world changes in grand halls, with speeches, crowns, and signatures, but most of the time, it changes in the mud, with people doing hard, patient work, while someone else bets on spectacle. Agincourt isn't just a story about arrows. It's a reminder that myths die hard, and usually in the rain. If this changed how you see power, remember, it always looks unbeatable until it slips. Even the proudest charge can sink in an inch of mud. If you felt that shift, share it, subscribe, and join us again next time as we follow how this muddy victory gave birth to something even larger. A world where strategy, not status, starts to decide who wins.